I flew 13 hours from Zurich to surprise Carmen for Three Kings Day after having completely paid off her €58,000 mortgage. And she called security, said, "Surprises are for people who belong here." I didn't say anything, I just left without uttering a word. And that night, I pressed a single button and started something none of them saw coming. "Surprises are for people who belong here," she repeated, looking at me as if I were a stranger on the street, not her son, not the boy who mowed the lawn under a scorching sun to help keep the lights on, not the man who emptied his savings to pay off her mortgage and allow her to retire early. No, to her, I was just a nuisance. That's when she called security. I hadn't seen my mother for over 2 years. Work kept me busy, long hours, constant travel, building a startup from scratch. But I never stopped helping the rent, the repairs. I even paid off her house last spring without telling her. I thought it would be the ultimate gift: freedom, security, peace. But the phone remained silent. Not a thank you, not a how are you, not even a message. I told myself she'd be busy, overwhelmed, perhaps. So when Three Kings Day approached and I had a few days off, I booked a surprise flight from Zurich. 13 hours, layovers, delays. I carried a bouquet of her favorite yellow roses. I even brought a pumpkin pie from the bakery she used to adore. When the taxi pulled up, I felt like a child again, nervous, hopeful. I climbed the porch steps, flowers in hand, heart in my throat. I heard footsteps. The door creaked open, and there she was, my mother, exactly as I remembered her. Hair in its perfect bun, glasses sliding down her nose, a cardigan wrapped tightly around her shoulders like armor. But her face didn't light up. Instead, her expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold and brittle. "I wanted to surprise you," I said, smiling. "It's Three Kings Day." She glanced over her shoulder, and for the first time I noticed the sound of laughter, people inside, familiar voices. My brother, Alvaro, my sister, Valeria, their partners, their children, a whole celebration I hadn't been invited to. "I flew across the world to see you," I said, swallowing the lump forming in my throat. "You should have called. I wanted to surprise you." She stepped out and closed the door behind her. "Surprises," she said slowly, "are for people who belong." I blinked. She looked past me and waved to a man in a security jacket who was watching from the gate. "He's not welcome," she said. I couldn't move or speak. The guard approached hesitantly. I think he expected me to yell, make a scene. But I didn't. I just nodded and walked away. I walked back down the street, dragging my suitcase, the pie in one hand, the roses in the other. I didn't look back. I didn't say a word. But that night, in my Airbnb, I pressed a single button and started something none of them saw coming. It didn't start on Three Kings Day. It started long before. I just didn't want to see it. When Julian died 5 years ago, everything changed. Not suddenly. It was silent, like a dripping faucet until the floor floods without you having heard a single drop. Back then, I moved heaven and earth to support Carmen. She was devastated, crying every night, unable to get out of bed. I flew home, took unpaid leave, paid the mortgage, organized the funeral. I didn't ask for anything in return. I was the good son, the responsible one, the one who fixed everything. And for a while, it was worth it. She called me her rock. My siblings, Valeria and Alvaro, stayed on the sidelines, barely lifting a finger. Alvaro posted about honoring Dad on Facebook while I single-handedly cleaned out the garage. Valeria sobbed dramatically at the funeral, then left early because her yoga retreat in Marbella couldn't wait. But I told myself, it's grief. People act strange. You have to give them time. And then came the requests. They started small. "Can you cover the water bill?" Valeria's car broke down, and she can't afford the repair. Alvaro's startup is struggling. He just needs a bridge loan. I said yes again and again, because that's what family does, right? I didn't see it then, but they weren't leaning on me. They were building a system, One where I was the ATM and they were the VIP clients. 2 years ago, I paid off Valeria's €9,000 credit card debt. She cried on the phone, told me I saved her life. A month later, she posted Instagram stories from a beachfront Airbnb with the caption, "Manifesting Luxury." Alvaro needed just €5,000 to launch a digital art gallery. "NFTs are the future," he said. I never saw that money again, nor the gallery. And Carmen played innocent, sweet, helpless. But she was the architect, the one forwarding Valeria's BISIM requests with a sad emoji, the one who forgot to mention she'd co-signed Alvaro's third loan, using my name until the debt collectors started calling me in Zurich. I confronted her once. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I didn't want to stress you," she said. "You've always been so stable. You're the strong one." I almost believed her. But 3 months before Three Kings Day, I got a call from the bank. "Congratulations," a woman said on the other end. "Your mortgage has been paid off. Your balance is now 0. I blinked. "What mortgage?" "The one on the house in Salamanca. Mrs. Dominguez's residence?" "My mother's house." I'd set up automatic payments a year ago when she was crying about her overdue bills. I'd been paying €400 a month in silence, without telling her. €58,000 total. I thought when she found out she would cry again, but this time, tears of joy. She didn't even call me. Not a single word. Instead, Valeria texted me 2 days later. "Hi, Mom says the house is paid off now. Guess that means you have extra cash? Alvaro needs help with rent in Barcelona." Not even a thank you. That's when something broke inside me. Not with shouts, but silently. It was the realization that I wasn't part of the family. Not to them. To them, I was an assigned role, a resource, a credit line with legs. I stopped answering the messages, but they kept coming. Alvaro emailed me a Google Doc titled Family Support Sheet. It included suggested contributions from me for the next quarter, as if I were a board member of their lives. Valeria sent screenshots of flights to Paris, asking if I could gift her the miles. Carmen forwarded me a quote for a kitchen renovation, €22,000 with the subject line, "You always said you wanted me to live comfortably." Nobody asked how I was doing. They didn't know I was dealing with insomnia, that I hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years, that my company was losing money and I'd stopped paying myself a salary so I could pay the team. They didn't know because they didn't care. The only call I got from Carmen that whole month was when her Amazon Spain account glitched while trying to make a purchase. "Your card must have expired," she said, annoyed. My card. Not even a hello. That's when I started planning the surprise. I thought, maybe if I show up in person, something will reset. She'll remember I'm not just numbers on a screen, that I'm her son, that I exist beyond what I give. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Just booked the flight, bought the flowers, the pie, rented an Airbnb nearby. But when she saw me, all she said was, "Surprises are for people who belong." And she called security. That night, I went back to my Airbnb, shaking with rage. I had a pressure in my chest as if I were going to explode. I paced back and forth until I finally pulled out my phone and pressed a button. I posted. It wasn't just a resentful tweet. I let it all out. Receipts, screenshots, the spreadsheet, the emails. I blurred the names, but I told the truth. I wrote for 5 hours straight. I didn't care about the consequences. I paid off my mother's €58,000 mortgage. I flew 13 hours to surprise her for Three Kings Day. She called security and said surprises are for people who belong. I didn't say anything, just left. But tonight, I pressed a button and started something none of them saw coming. It went viral in 6 hours. 50,000 likes by sunrise. Strangers were calling me a hero. Others were sharing their own stories about toxic families and financial abuse. Therapists were quoting my thread. Influencers were DMing me. Even a celebrity shared it, saying, "Families don't have a right to exploit you just because you share blood." Valeria texted, "Are you crazy? Delete this now." Alvaro sent 3 messages in a row. Dude, seriously? What is this? You're ruining Mom's reputation. This is low. Carmen finally called. I didn't answer. For 3 days, I didn't say a word. Not to Valeria, not to Alvaro, not to my mother. But they didn't stop. The messages became frantic, angry, then desperate. You've humiliated the family. This isn't how you fix things. Delete that post or don't ever show your face around here again. I had no intention of doing either. But I wasn't finished either. On the 4th day, Carmen sent me a voice message. Her tone was calm but sharp, sweetness as a weapon. Darling, I'm trying to be the adult here. Clearly you're upset, but you made your point, okay? Now it's time to fix this. Valeria's job is at risk. Alvaro's landlord saw the post and is asking questions. And me, well, the people I go to church with are calling me. She paused for effect. Is that what you wanted? To embarrass your own mother all over the internet. I stared at the screen for a full minute and then I called her. She answered on the first ring. Oh, so now you're ready to talk? I'm coming over, I said curtly. I'll be there in 30. She hesitated. Wait, what do you mean you're coming? I mean, open the door. I hung up. When I climbed those porch steps again, the same ones where they'd shut the door in my face days before, it felt different. Not like coming home. More like arriving in a war zone. Alvaro's car was in the driveway. Valeria's Asio too. Perfect. I wanted them all there. Carmen opened the door before I could knock. Her face was tight, arms crossed. Valeria stood behind her on the stairs, glaring at me. Alvaro was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter like a lawyer preparing for an interrogation. Finally here to apologize, Valeria sneered. Sit down, I said. No one moved. I said, sit down. And they sat. I pulled out an old-fashioned paper folder. Printouts, company records, payment logs, wire transfers, invoices. All of this, I said, throwing it on the table, is every euro I've given this family in the last 6 years. Carmen glanced at it, then looked away. You think you embarrassed me on the internet? I've been picking up the pieces of this family in silence for years, without complaining, while you all laughed at me behind my back. You want to know what's really embarrassing? That it took me going viral for any of you to realize how disgusting this has all become. Alvaro scoffed. You're acting like we forced you. You offered to help. You manipulated me, I said firmly. And that's not the same. You played the we're family card every time you needed money, but when I showed up at the door with flowers and pie, you sent me to security. Carmen's voice rose. Why did you humiliate us? I turned to her, my eyes burning. You humiliated yourself. I paid off your mortgage, 58,000 euros, and you couldn't even send me a text. You organized a whole 3 Kings Day dinner pretending I didn't exist. Her lips curled. You always act like a victim. I let out a harsh laugh. I didn't act like a son. You treated me like an investment plan. And when I stopped generating returns, you shut the door in my face. Valeria slammed her glass on the table. You have no right to judge us. You're not a saint just because you make more money. No, Valeria, I'm not a saint. But I'm not your walking wallet either. Alvaro stood up, trying to be imposing. You think money makes you better than us? I didn't answer. I stood up to face him, looking him directly in the eye. It shut him up, but it opened his eyes wide. Then I dropped the final bomb. I talked to a lawyer. Silence. Carmen blinked. What for? I pulled out a second envelope. Remember co-signing Alvaro's loan without telling me? That's called financial fraud. Alvaro paled. I'm not pressing charges for now. But that loan is officially yours now. I had it reassigned. You're welcome. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and sat down. Valeria was staring at me like I'd grown horns. You're being petty. Spiteful. I'm setting boundaries. I looked around the table one last time. This was never about money. It was about respect. And none of you have shown me an ounce of it. Carmen shook her head like I was a child throwing a tantrum. You've made your point. Are you happy now? No, I said, but I will be. I picked up my phone, opened the banking app. One tap. Transfer cancelled. Automatic payments deleted. Visum linked to Amazon Spain unlinked. Backup credit card for Alvaro removed. I smiled. Happy Three Kings Day. And I walked out again. But this time, I didn't go quietly. When I walked out of that house for the second time, I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Something inside me had been reduced to ashes, and what emerged wasn't sadness. It was clarity. I was done. Done being the reliable one. Done being the strong one. While they bled me dry with a smile. That night, I turned off my phone and poured myself a drink in the Airbnb. The notifications kept coming. My story had already surpassed 100,000 shares. People from all over the world were writing to me. Strangers calling me brave. Therapists writing threads about emotional dependency. Journalists requesting interviews. But nothing hit me as hard as a single comment. The people who say you're cruel are the ones who fed on your silence. I read it 10 times because it was true. The next morning, I boarded my flight back to Zurich. As the plane took off, so did the weight in my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating how much money I had left to send someone. I wasn't checking email, waiting for another Visum request disguised as a family emergency. I just stared out the window and exhaled. And then silence. Glorious, painful, but mine. No messages from Carmen. No guilt trips from Valeria. No urgent calls from Alvaro. But not because they didn't try. I'd blocked them all. The first week back was surreal. I kept expecting to feel guilty, like an invisible hand was going to reach into my chest and squeeze it tight. But that feeling never came. Instead, I felt peace. I worked without distractions. I slept through the night. I went for walks at 2 a.m. just because I could. I even booked a weekend retreat in the Alps. Nothing fancy, but the kind of thing I always told myself I didn't have time for. But chaos doesn't die quietly. 2 weeks later, Valeria tried to fight back publicly. She posted a passive-aggressive message on social media about family not being transactional, with vague references to certain people using the internet for attention. Her friends applauded, but unfortunately for her, the internet didn't buy it. Screenshots of her old messages leaked, where she bragged about milking her rich brother like a cash cow. The post was deleted in less than 24 hours. Alvaro didn't say anything online, but I knew he was in freefall when I got a call from a blocked number. It was his boss. Turns out, Alvaro had put me down as a professional reference, and someone, apparently, had found the viral thread. Is all of this true? The man asked. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. Alvaro was fired that same week. Carmen, predictably, doubled down. Friends told me she was saying I'd lost my mind and turned against the family. She even organized a small dinner at her house. Same table, same floor, fewer guests. I saw a picture. She looked tired, defeated. And for once, no one was pretending. Then something happened that I didn't expect. Distant relatives started writing to me. Not to scold, but to thank me. An aunt I barely knew messaged me, I always admired how you handled things. Now I understand how much you carried. A cousin in Galicia wrote, when I read your story, I cried. I'm going through the same thing with my parents. You gave me courage. Even Carmen's sister, who I hadn't spoken to in over 10 years, wrote, your mother did the same thing to me. I just didn't have the courage to walk away. You did. That's when I understood. I wasn't destroying the family. I was exposing the rot that was already there. The money wasn't the problem. It never was. It was the entitlement, the performance, the way they only showed love when there was something to gain. Without my money, there was nothing left to hold them together. I was the glue. And when I walked away, the cracks burst wide open. But the biggest surprise came 3 weeks later. I was at work when my assistant poked her head in the door. There's someone downstairs asking for you, she said. He says he's your brother. I froze. Which one? She blinked. He didn't say. But he looks rough. It was Alvaro. I found him in the lobby, arms crossed. He looked destroyed. Hair messy, dark circles under his eyes. He'd lost weight. No arrogant smirk. No rehearsed phrases. He looked up at me. I screwed up. No excuses, no accusations. Just those 3 words. I didn't say anything. He swallowed hard. I lost my job. Valeria won't talk to me. Mom acts like she's the one who was betrayed. He looked down. I know I can't undo what I did, he said. But I came here to tell you something. He pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot. He'd completely paid off the loan he'd co-signed using my name. No help from Carmen. No help from Valeria. Just him. I'm fixing what I can, he said. And I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to tell you, I'm sorry. I didn't hug him. I didn't cry. But I nodded. That was enough. I didn't go back for Christmas. Or birthdays. Not even when Carmen accidentally sent me a blurry photo from an old family album with the message, "Some memories are priceless." I left her on read. And you know what? I didn't feel guilty. Because for the first time in my life, I had nothing to justify. I wasn't the villain. I was the one who finally turned off the tap while everyone else screamed that the water was their birthright. I used to think family meant unconditional love. Now I know that for some families, it means unconditional access. Access to your time. Access to your money. Access to your silence. And when you take that away, they don't mourn you. They mourn the services you provided. My mother didn't miss me. She missed the mortgage being paid on time. Valeria didn't miss her brother. She missed the free flights, the surprise bison, the "hey, can you just?" Alvaro, he got it in the end. But only because life finally told him no like I never knew how to. I still remember the last message Carmen sent me before I blocked her for good. You were always the difficult one. Maybe if you'd made a little more effort, we wouldn't be here. I laughed so hard, I almost dropped my phone. I made more effort than any of them. So much so that I paid for 3 lives that weren't mine. And still, they called me selfish when, for the first time, I chose myself. And here's the twist they'll never admit. They needed me more than I needed them. Because now I'm thriving. I sleep. I hike. I eat food that tastes good because it's for me. I booked a month off for next spring. No emergencies. No accounts drained by the irresponsibility of others. People ask me if I regret making my story public. Not for a second. Because sometimes shame is the only currency abusers understand. They didn't care when I drowned in silence. But when I stood up and said, I'm taking back control, the world listened. And they hated it. They didn't lose their cash cow. They lost the version of me that tolerated being taken for granted. I didn't burn bridges. I simply refused to keep building them alone. Let them build them next time, if they bleed for someone else. And me? I'm free. And I'm not going back.